This is Jim Williams with the Hurricane City Tropical Update for August 31st, 7:30 p.m. Here's the graphical tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center. All eyes are on Hurricane Earl, east of the southeast Bahamas, major hurricane moving off to the northwest. We have Tropical Storm Fiona approaching the northern Leeward Islands, but this is getting caught in the circulation of Earl, and Fiona may just wash out in the next several days. Several of the global models indicated that was going to happen during the week, and there was quite a discussion about it at Cane Talk, but this is definitely what ended up happening, and the models were right on that. And we have Invest 98L out here in the East Atlantic, 10% chance of development, but the Canadian model indicates this is going to become a hurricane, cruise off to the west, and become Gaston, and we have a long time to watch that, but all eyes right now are on Hurricane Earl. Here is the forecast track and cone of error on the close-up map at Hurricane City. And let's zoom in on this a little bit and show you that it goes from a Category 4 down to Category 2 status. Now, the reason for the cone of error being as wide as it is there's a little bit of a spread in the models today compared to what there was yesterday at this time. But the spread in the left is primarily because of the no-gaps model out here, showing it going over the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And the BAM models and the UK Met is all the way to the right over here, on the right side of the guidance. So the National Hurricane Center usually goes right through the middle, and they're usually pretty good at 3 days out. They generally nail these tracks. But there is that error right there, and a wobble or a little bit of a shift in the course could bring hurricane conditions over the Outer Banks, so the people in North Carolina need to be prepared just in case, have everything on standby, and if this thing keeps shifting to the west, then you maybe need to start getting prepared for hurricane conditions. But the reason the no gaps over here is so pronounced in thinking that this is going to go over the Outer Banks is because they're indicating that what's going to happen, there's an area of low pressure that's going to move through the Great Lakes up here and strengthen, and that's going to sling a cold front through and send this off to the northeast. Now, the no gaps keeps this relatively weak compared to the other models, the the GFS, the ECMWF, and the UK Met. Several of these models indicate this is going to get really strong up in here, but the no gaps keeps it rather weak and further to the north. So the no gaps is taking it more into the Outer Banks, but that looks like that's not going to happen. Most of the models indicate there's going to be a strong low pressure area up near the Great Lakes, and that's going to slingshot this toward the Canadian Maritimes. Also, the high pressure ridge out here is going to break down a little bit. Yeah, the no gaps holds on to it a little bit longer. So the no gaps, there's not a lot of high confidence in the no gaps. It's been a pretty bad model this year. But it'll be interesting. It'll get a lot of credibility if this does go over the Outer Banks of North Carolina. If the center passes over the Outer Banks, people start paying attention to the no gaps a little bit more. Here's the watch area over most of the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and stretching down near Topsail Beach, which was badly hit by Hurricane Fran back in 1996, and Duck, North Carolina, just south of the Virginia border. People in Virginia and down near Wilmington need to pay close attention to this as well, as it could go deviate off the expected forecast track. Now, here are the models from yesterday, and notice there's a pronounced curve off to the northeast by every single model. Now, what's happened today is there's been a little bit of a shift in the Navy no gaps model, again taking it over the Outer Banks. But again, here's the BAM model over here, and the official forecast is right down the center. But again, that's because of that area low pressure up here that's going to slingshot this off to the northeast. And I think the Hurricane Center has a pretty good beat on this at this point. Here are the forecast tropical storm wind speed probabilities. We notice here almost 60 to 70% chance of tropical storm force winds in the Outer Banks and up near Nantucket Island, of course, up near Nova Scotia. They're probably going to take a direct hit from a Category 1 up in here, but most of the highest winds remain offshore. Here are the pressure fields from sailweather.info, and the 1019 millibar pressure fields right here is the steering current on Hurricane Earl, high pressure over here. Earl is following the periphery of this. And again, this high pressure is going to weaken, and this is going to start moving more to the north, and that's the official forecast from the National Hurricane Center. But hurricanes follow the path of least resistance, and that's why Hurricane Earl is beginning to turn to the northwest. It's feeling the weakness now, and it should begin turning more and more to the north. Here is the 78-degree isotherm map from the Hurricane Research Division. Hurricanes need not only 78-degree temperatures at the surface, but they need 78-degree temperatures below the surface, because when the ocean gets all churned up, cooler water surfaces, and that weakens hurricanes. Well, look at this. Right near 30 degrees north, there's a whole pocket of cool waters out here below the surface that will get mixed up and brought to the surface. That might be another reason why the AVNO model, which is the best performing model on the intensity, is indicating that this could wind down rather quickly here and be down to Category 1 status when it gets up near 40 degrees north. We'll have to see about that. But it does need the warmer sea surface temperatures, and they're not there right now. They're at the surface, but not below the surface. Here is the best performing model on Earl so far in all of its journeys. And we have a model showing this going well offshore the Outer Banks and heading into Nova Scotia and Newfoundland up in here. But what's happening, this is the Aviation Ensemble model, and these models have been just horrible on this system, off by over 500 miles on average on Hurricane Earl. This one's been off by 455 miles. So what does that tell you? All the models have been horrible, but this is the best one out of all the models, and this takes it offshore. Take this with a grain of salt. It's just showing you what the best performer is showing. All right, here is the closest approach to the Outer Banks. This will be happening on the 3rd, which is on Friday in the early morning hours. Hurricane Earl should be passing about 80 nautical miles east of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. Inside the Aqua Circle are sustained tropical storm force winds, so there's 50 to 60 mile an hour winds expected for the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Everybody else over here should have northeast winds around 40 to 50 miles an hour as this passes off to the northeast. Remember, this will be pulling away from the Outer Banks at that time, so the winds will be a little bit less than if it was coming directly in on the Outer Banks. Closest point of approach to Long Island, New York. Showing this coming in at roughly about 180 miles to the southeast of Long Beach, Long Island, and they should have winds around 40 to 50 miles an hour out of the northeast as this passes off to the east, and the tropical storm sustained winds remain well offshore of Long Island. Here's the closest point of approach to Nantucket Island and Cape Cod. They will feel some of these sustained tropical storm force winds up around 50, 60 miles an hour, but most people up near Boston and surrounding areas, Providence, will have northeast winds around 40, gusting to 40 to 45 miles an hour, but the sustained winds will remain well offshore. What about Nova Scotia? Direct hit, Category 1. This will be on Saturday afternoon. This will be coming onshore in Nova Scotia, so people up in Nova Scotia need to be prepared for hurricane conditions. Here are all the systems that were in the same exact position around this time of the year between August 30th and September 1st. There's only 3 systems that really come to mind here. The 1933 hurricane that hit West Palm Beach moved through this area. The 1932 hurricane, which battered the northwest Bahamas, moved through this location. And Hurricane Ike, on its way towards Cuba, was moving through this particular area right around this time of the year and ended up doing a lot of devastation in Galveston, taking quite a few lives up there. So 3 systems. None of them hit Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. Here's the East Atlantic again. Invest 98L out here, a little bit better organized this evening, moving off to the west. And here's another wave in Africa that will emerge late in the week. We have a long way to go yet for the Cape Verde season. All right, let's take a look at some graphics here. First of all, this is from tropicalatlantic.com. This is the error on the track forecast for Hurricane Earl. Now notice here early in the period there's a very low error. When you get out around 36 hours, you're talking about 75 to 100 miles in difference. But what happens is when you get over here to 174 hours, notice the difference in the models. They're all off by about 500, 600, 700 miles off on their accuracy when they get out this far into the distance. But here's the best performer, the AP10 model, 455 nautical miles off, as I mentioned earlier, and that shows it keeps staying way off of North Carolina. Now here are the intensity forecast models. Again, the error goes out quite a bit as you go out in time, but here's the best performer also on the intensity is the AVNO. I mentioned that earlier, 46 knots off at 174 hours, and that keeps it right around Cat 1, Cat 2, around 40 degrees north, so it does weaken it rather fast as it gets up north in the Atlantic. Here's the floater on Hurricane Earl. Now, during the day, some dry air got wrapped into the system. It went through an eye wall replacement cycle, but now it's making a little bit of a comeback. But I think it's pretty much topped out. The Hurricane Hunter aircraft was out there, and they found the pressure has been up to 940 millibars from a low of 930 millibars. So it's lost 10 millibars of strength today. But it might make a little bit of a comeback here, but I think it's running out of time as there's a lot of dry air in the north of this system. Let's take a look at a water vapor loop, and you can see it here. There's a whole bunch of dry air right here being pulled into the system, and we have an upper level low out here causing about 30, 40, 50 knots of shear just north of the system, but it's heading in this general direction, so it's not going to be the most ideal of situations for strengthening. So I think this may have topped out here at Category 4 status, and then it'll weaken here as it gets up near North Carolina, down to Category 2 like the National Hurricane Center, and then Category 1 for Nova Scotia. And we're watching the trough coming across here. That's what's going to pick up Earl and slingshot it off to the northeast. And here is Fiona quickly getting wrapped into Earl's circulation. No development expected with that. That system should weaken and be a non-factor. That's it for now. Check out HurricaneCity.com for the latest information on Hurricane Earl. And if you live in the mid-Atlantic states, just pay very close attention to this and have your supplies handy. Be prepared to take all your loose objects inside, as there's going to be a pretty windy and rough sea day or 2 days as it gets up there over the next few days in the mid-Atlantic states. That's it for now. Thank you again for visiting Hurricane City.